It's our reading from the book that our lovely viewer Sky Guardian has sent for the benefit of all of us. It's his own guru's book by Swami Tadatmanandaji in his experience about India and how he became a sannyasi, a monk, a renunciate, and what monkhood looks like for him. Here we've already started the introduction. We had just finished on how, like how in India, the markets are often very chaotic. Some people selling things for a ridiculous markup. There are many entrepreneurs who might scam you. So too the spiritual landscape is filled with a variety of scam artists, entrepreneurs piggybacking, and some genuine, authentic sellers. I warily joined the throng in the spiritual marketplace. Most of my fellow seekers came from India's many provinces. Some were highly educated. Others were simple village folk. Western seekers like myself still come to India, but in smaller numbers than in the 1960s, when rock and roll, drugs, and the mystical East were all part of a youthful fad. Certainly, all seekers do not fit into a single mold. Some seek answers to their fundamental questions about life. Others want to know God or how to merge with the whole in mystical union. Some seek comfort and blessings at the feet of great saints, and some are simply curious. Like many others, I explored India's spiritual landscape on a personal quest for self-fulfillment. I enjoyed rapturous discoveries that evoked tears of joy, and I suffered horrible disillusionments with bitter tears of despair. In venerated traditions, I found both incredible beauty and ridiculous excess. Among contemporary teachers, I found wise men and women of great compassion, as well as self-serving opportunists who assumed a holy guise to prey upon the desperate and gullible. On my first visit to India, I experienced intense culture shock. Everything was so different. Customs, climate, food, dress, language, standard of living. I had never traveled to a third world country before, and my initial trip seemed more like visiting an alien planet. I struggled to adapt, to learn the customs, and to understand the complexities of the Hindu culture. I was fortunate to meet several sympathetic and knowledgeable people who patiently helped me become intimate with India and her people. I felt privileged to enter so deeply into a culture of great antiquity and beauty. While exploring India's spiritual landscape, I constantly looked through two different sets of eyes. One pair belonged to a seeker who was eager to find answers to heartfelt questions. The other pair to a skeptic who maintained a critical, rational perspective at all times. My background in engineering and computer science had molded my thinking. I was not inclined to believe in anything. Even today, I remain firmly established in this orientation. I have never been satisfied with mere faith. Instead, I want to know, to experience, to understand fully and directly. I think one's intellect and common sense need never be abandoned in a spiritual quest. Objective thinking protects one from being deluded, like a compass that steers one away from trouble and towards the goal. In my travels, I met quite a few conservative Hindus who regarded everything ancient as good and everything modern as bad. Such people are inclined to unquestioningly accept anything traditional. Their attitude reminded me of the Roman Catholic Church during the Middle Ages, when it insisted that the earth was flat in spite of contemporary scientific evidence to the contrary. Since I was not reared in a Hindu family, I never acquired such biases. I exercised my judgment to evaluate everything to the best of my ability. I embraced what was personally meaningful and left the rest behind. On the other hand, I did not want an excess of caution or skepticism to prevent me from penetrating deeply into this spiritual world. I did not go as a scientific researcher whose motto was, "Look but don't touch." My goal was personal, so I found it helpful to immerse myself as thoroughly as possible. After years of meditation and spiritual study in America, I went to India several times, staying a total of 2 years. I adopted the dress of a religious student and traveled to sacred places, studying in ashrams and practicing various spiritual disciplines. I was taught to read and write Sanskrit, the language of the scriptures. I learned to speak some Hindi, the main language used throughout much of North India. I traveled in the company of fellow seekers, mostly Indian, many of whom I am deeply indebted to for their guidance and support. Those years of seeking proved to be far more fruitful than I could possibly have imagined. My journey, following paths charted by the ancient sages, culminated in a profound inner transformation. At length I found what I was looking for. This journey also happened to lead to my ordination as a sannyasi, a Hindu monk, for the reasons that will be made clear in the coming pages. In the years following my ordination, I have been delighted and privileged by the opportunity to guide many others along these same paths. At the suggestion of my students, I started to write a book about what I discovered. I wanted to make the vision of the sages completely accessible to all, including Western-born readers. For this reason, I initially tried to extract these teachings from their Indian cultural context and present them in a straightforward, culturally neutral manner. I abandoned the project before this book was even half written. The lifeless chapters were boring and tedious. By distilling the teachings of the sages to bare essentials, I had transformed their marvelous poetic vision of fullness into dry, abstract, philosophical concepts. I concluded that their teachings could be far better conveyed by preserving their cultural context. So, I started to write again, this time presenting these teachings in the context of my own spiritual search in India. This book is the story of my journey, but its purpose is not merely to tell how some American computer engineer became a Hindu monk. Some of the most profound insights of the sages are explored in this book, interleaved with stories about India's spiritual subculture. As you vicariously explore these realms in the coming chapters, you will find yourself traveling the same paths tread by the ancient sages, and you will have opportunities to discover what they discovered. So, let us conclude our reading of The Roar of the Ganges by Swami Tadatmanandaji, and we shall continue it tomorrow.